Hello, welcome again to Sonnettics, my weekly podcast about sonnets. As I did last week, I spent the last few minutes watching last week's podcast episode about sonnets, and um, I as I did last week's podcast, last week's episode, um, I had some thoughts about what I might want to do moving forward. And obviously, if you remember last week, or if you just watched last week's, I read a couple of sonnets or a couple of poems that I had written, and that was what I also did on the first week, was a sonnet that I had written, or about sonnets that I'd written. And so this week I really do want to be mindful of these podcast episodes not just being about me and about what I like. It's really not just my favorite thing to talk about. Hopefully, I'm not that egotistical. Um, but the other thing that I talked about previously was famous sonnet writers, and I think that a lot of people recognize Shakespeare as a famous sonnet writer. Obviously, I talked about that I knew Shakespeare as a famous sonnet writer, and then there was the Italian sonnet writer Petrarch, um, and so. And again, here you have two men who wrote sonnets, and I thought, well, it would be good to have to talk about a woman sonnet writer. And so today I'm going to talk about um, Elizabeth Barret Browning, who was a poet, and who wrote sonnets as well. I think that probably one of the most famous sonnets, or famous lines of a sonnet, was written by Elizabeth Barrett Browning. Um, and Elizabeth Barrett Browning was married to a poet named Robert Browning, who was a famous poet as well. And she wrote a book of sonnets called Sonnets from the Portuguese, which she gave to her husband, Robert. Sonnets from the Portuguese, again, a lot of people who see it, and when I saw it, I thought, oh, these were translated from Portuguese. She translated these sonnets from Portuguese. Well, that's exactly what she wanted people to think, not that she had written them, because she and her husband, as poets, were getting. She felt like they were getting too famous, I guess you could say, that they wanted to protect their privacy some, and so she thought that writing these sonnets, being thought of as the translator of these sonnets, would not be as famous, or would help protect her privacy somehow. Um, Clearly, that didn't work. Uh, the first sonnet that I wanted to read, to share from these sonnets from the Portuguese by Elizabeth Barrett Browning, is the famous one that I think everyone has heard, at least the first line of this sonnet. And in these sonnets from the Portuguese that she wrote for her husband, she wrote 44 sonnets, and I laugh at that too, the irony of it for me, because four is actually my favorite number. Um, I know that there is some discussion about how, four is like a square, it's got four sides, and so people who associate mostly with the number four are square people. Well, I hope I'm not that square, but um, four is my favorite number. I call it my lucky number because, and I've mentioned in the past that I served in the military, and something that military people do on their time off, in the evenings or whatever, um, and which I did as well because I enjoyed doing this, was we play poker. And so we were playing poker one night, and if you know how to to play poker, you'll understand this. If not, then I'm sorry, but um, I drew a hand, a poker hand, where right off the top. I mean, it was, I think I don't know what they call it, a cold draw or what, but I didn't have to trade any cards to get this. I drew a four of a kind, and the four of a kind was fours. I drew all four fours from the deck of cards, and of course I won the hand because the four of a kind is pretty hard to beat. Um, so I decided right then and there that four was going to be my lucky number. Well, again, and I didn't know this at the time. I may have, but Elizabeth Barret Browning, when she wrote these sonnets from the Portuguese for her husband Robert Browning, she wrote 44 of them. And the famous one that I'm going to read first here um, was actually number 43, and she titled them that way. It's entitled number 43. How do I love thee? Let me count the ways. I don't even have to read that one. Everybody knows that. How do I love thee? Let me count the ways. I love thee to the depth and breadth and height my soul can reach when feeling out of sight. For ends the being, for ends, for the ends of being and ideal grace, I love thee to the level of everydays. Most quiet need by sun and candlelight. I love thee freely as men strive for right. I love thee purely as they turn from praise. I love thee with the passion put to use in my old griefs and with my childhood's faith. I love thee with a love I seem to lose. With my lost saints, I love thee with the breath, smiles, tears, all my life, and if God choose, I shall but love thee better after death. That if you're listening closely, which I hope you were, but this is not a Shakespearean sonnet. This is a Petrarchan, an Italian sonnet. Um, and I'll remind you that the Italian Petrarchan sonnets, the Shakespearean sonnets rhyme A B C D C D E F G G. So you got alternating lines that rhyme, followed by at the end two lines that rhyme together. It's called a couplet. That last set of lines. Well, the Petrarchan or the Italian sonnet has a different rhyme scheme to it. It rhymes A B B A, A B B A, and then after the eighth line, you have, and I think we talked about this before, the volta. The volta means to turn, and so after the eighth line, the sonnet should turn. A Petrarchan sonnet should turn. Um, and there are various different ways that the sonnet can turn. Generally, what happens is that it's almost like a question answer. The first 8 lines will be the question, and then the last 6 lines of the sonnet, to make 14, obviously, will be the answer to that. Um, and so she does. She does pose the question, how do I love thee? Let me count the ways. Um, it's a little more difficult to see the turn, if you will, because the whole rest of the sonnet, if you will, becomes about how she's going to love her husband, to love Robert. Um, and so we can look at that as the turn if you want, but let me go back again to the sonnet itself. How do I love thee? Let me count the ways. I love thee to the depth and breadth and height. Well, ways and height don't rhyme. No, but I love thee to the depth and breadth and height my soul can reach when feeling out of sight. Height, sight. And going back again to that first line, how do I love thee? Let me count the ways. And then she, in her fourth line, for the ends of being and ideal grace. Well, ways and grace are a slant rhyme. That is, slant rhyme is in poetry, when something is almost rhymes. Obviously, the opposite of there, that compared to a perfect rhyme would be place, face, or let, get. Those are perfect rhymes. Ways, grace. That's almost a rhyme, so it's what is referred to as a slant rhyme. Um, I love thee to the level, this is the fifth line. I love thee to the level of every day's most quiet need. And here, um, the that thought, I love thee to the level of every day's most quiet need. Um, but she cuts it off, cuts the line is cut off at the end of after every day's. I love thee to the level of every day's. What? And you have to read on to the next line. I love thee to the level of every day's most quiet need. Um, and that when the thought is cut in the middle in order to match to make the form to fit the form, that cutting off of the line and then continuing on the thought on the next line is called enjambment. Enjambment. Jambment. So you're and actually enjambment gets used um, in more than just sonnets. It gets used throughout poetry as a, a technique, I don't know what you'd call it. I know that there's a word for it, but yeah. So carrying on that thought on the next line is called enjambment. Let's look again at the poem, going to the ninth line, I hope. I love thee with the passion put to use in my old griefs. Again, there's enjambment. I love thee to the passion put to use in my old griefs, and with my childhood's faith, I love thee with a love I seem to lose. With my lost saints, I love thee with the breath. Well, and that's interesting there too, because she doesn't stick to that A B B A rhymes, sort of rhymes. Well, and that actually that is the volta, the turn in Italian sonnets is um, they shift that way. So there we went from use faith, well, and then we get not a rhyme with faith, but a rhyme with use. Lose. I love thee with a love I seemed to lose. Again, enjambment. I seem to lose with my lost saints. So there is enjambment in that line as well, um, or in that after the volta, that final 6 lines of the poem, which is called a sestet. That's the other thing and I don't know if I can't remember if we talked about this before, but generally the form of the sonnet will be broken into the numbers of lines, and in the Petrarchan sonnet, and well, in most sonnets you get um, 3 quartets. A quartet, quart being 4, a quartet being 4 lines. So 3 quartets followed by a couplet, which is 2, would be 3 times 4 is 12 plus 2, that's 14. Um, that's with a Shakespearean sonnet. In the Petrarchan sonnet, you get the 2 quartets followed by a sestet. Sestet, ses meaning 6. So 2 quartets, 2 times 4 is 8. With a sestet, that makes 14 total. Um, the other thing I wanted to do is that I am going to uh, stop around 14 minutes with these episodes, and we are at 14 minutes now as I look at the clock on the camera. So, but again, because 14 is a great number, and obviously it's the number of lines in the sonnet, I am going to attempt to stop these sonnets after 14 minutes, or these episodes after 14 minutes of talking. So thank you for joining me today. It's been 14 and a half minutes now, but I hope to see you next week as well.